The marble floors of the Castellano estate gleamed under afternoon sunlight, streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, each surface polished to perfection by someone paid to make wealth look effortless. Elena Moretti moved through the grand foyer with practiced efficiency, her cleaning supplies tucked discreetly in a canvas bag that had seen better days. At 23, she'd learned to make herself invisible in houses like this, seen but not noticed, present but not intrusive. The agency had sent her to fill in for the regular housekeeper who'd called in sick, and Elena needed every dollar she could earn. Her studio apartment in Brooklyn didn't pay for itself, and the community college tuition for her night classes and early childhood education certainly wouldn't cover itself through good intentions alone. Third floor, nursery and master suite. The estate manager had instructed that morning, barely looking up from her tablet. The Rossi family values discretion and efficiency. You'll be done by 4. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Elena climbed the sweeping staircase, her worn sneakers silent against marble steps that probably cost more than her entire year's rent. The third floor opened into a hallway lined with original artwork, pieces she recognized from her art history textbook, the kind that belonged in museums, not private homes. The nursery door stood slightly ajar, and that's when she heard it. The crying. Not the normal fussy sounds of a baby needing a diaper change or a bottle. This was the desperate, exhausted sobbing of a child who'd been crying so long their little voice had gone hoarse. Elena's heart clenched with immediate recognition. She'd heard that sound before, back when she'd volunteered at the children's shelter during high school. She pushed the door open carefully, scanning the room for the nanny or parent who should have been there. The nursery was spectacular. Decorated in soft creams and golds with a hand-carved crib that looked like it belonged to royalty. Toys that cost more than Elena's monthly food budget lined custom shelves. But no adult was present. Just a baby, maybe 18 months old, standing in the crib with tears streaming down his flushed cheeks. His dark curls were damp with sweat, his tiny hands gripping the crib rails as his body shook with sobs. Elena set down her cleaning supplies and approached slowly, her voice automatically softening. "Hey there, little one. Where's your mama? Where's your nanny?" The baby hiccuped, his crying pausing momentarily as he registered her presence. His eyes, deep brown and far too sad for someone so young, fixed on her face with desperate hope. "It's okay," Elena murmured, reaching the crib. She could see he'd been crying for a while, his onesie damp with tears and sweat. "You're okay, sweet boy." The baby reached for her immediately, his small arms stretching up with the universal gesture of a child needing comfort. Elena glanced toward the door, half expecting someone to appear and explain the situation. When no one came, she made a decision that would change everything. She lifted the baby from the crib, and he immediately buried his face against her shoulder, his sobs intensifying now that he had someone to hold him. The weight of him was familiar. She'd babysat throughout high school and college, knew how to support a toddler's head, how to pat a back in the rhythm that soothed. "Shh, shh," she whispered, swaying gently. "I've got you. You're safe." But the baby wouldn't calm. His cries echoed through the elegant nursery, each sob tearing at Elena's heart. She tried everything she knew, gentle bouncing, soft humming, walking in slow circles. Nothing worked. Then, without quite deciding to do it, she began to sing. The lullaby rose from somewhere deep in her memory, words her nonna had sung when Elena was small, before the cancer had taken her. It was old Neapolitan, passed down through generations of women in her family who'd brought it from the villages outside Naples. "Nina nana, Nina o, questo bimbo a chi lo do." The effect was immediate and startling. The baby's crying stuttered to a stop. His small body went still against her shoulder, and then he pulled back slightly to look at her face with wonder, tears still clinging to his dark lashes. Elena kept singing, the Italian words flowing easily despite years of disuse. Her grandmother had insisted she learn the old songs, had spent countless evenings teaching her the melodies and meanings even as Elena's mother rolled her eyes at old country nonsense. Se lo do alla Befana, se lo tiene una settimana. The baby's breathing began to even out, his hiccups fading as he listened with absolute focus. One tiny hand came up to touch Elena's face, his fingers gentle against her cheek, as if confirming she was real. Se lo do all'uomo nero, se lo tiene un anno intero. She finished the first verse and started again, watching as the exhaustion finally caught up with him. His eyelids grew heavy, his body relaxing into the kind of boneless surrender that only small children achieve in sleep. Elena continued singing even after his eyes closed, wanting to ensure he was truly settled before she attempted to put him down. She moved to the rocking chair near the window, cradling him carefully as afternoon light painted everything in gold. That's when she heard the voice behind her, cold and sharp as a knife. "Who the hell are you? And how did you get into my son's room?" Elena's heart stopped. She turned slowly, careful not to wake the baby, and found herself face to face with the most dangerous-looking man she'd ever seen. He stood in the doorway like he owned not just the room, but the entire world, his 6-foot-plus frame filling the space with barely contained menace. A charcoal suit, clearly custom made, couldn't quite disguise the predatory grace of his movements as he stepped inside. Dark hair, sharp jawline, and eyes the color of midnight that were currently assessing her with the kind of cold calculation that made her blood run ice. But it was the scar that made her breath catch. A thin white line running from his left temple down to his jaw, a mark that suggested violence survived rather than avoided. "I asked you a question." His voice was quiet, controlled, which somehow made it more terrifying than if he'd shouted. "And you have approximately 5 seconds to answer before I call security." "I'm Elena," she managed, keeping her voice low for the sleeping baby's sake, even as her pulse hammered. "Elena Moretti. The cleaning agency sent me. Your estate manager told me to clean the 3rd floor." His eyes narrowed dangerously. "The cleaning staff doesn't touch my son's room. Ever. That's a standing rule." "I didn't know. I just heard him crying, and there was no one here, and I couldn't just leave him." "So you broke protocol and entered a restricted area." He moved closer, each step measured and deliberate. "Do you have any idea how many people would love to get access to my home? To my son?" The implication was clear and chilling. He thought she was some kind of threat, possibly sent by enemies to harm his child. Elena's arms instinctively tightened around the sleeping baby, her protective instincts overriding her fear. "I'm not here to hurt anyone," she said firmly, meeting his dangerous gaze despite the fear coursing through her. "I heard a baby crying alone, and I did what any decent person would do. I comforted him." Something flickered in those cold eyes. Surprise, maybe, at being challenged. He glanced at his son, taking in the peaceful sleep, the way the toddler's small fist clutched Elena's shirt, the dried tear tracks on his cheeks. "He was crying?" The question came out softer, edged with something that might have been guilt or concern. For a while, from the sound of it, he was exhausted. Elena shifted carefully in the rocking chair. "Where's his nanny?" "Fired her 3 hours ago." He ran a hand through his dark hair, the gesture revealing frustration beneath his controlled exterior. "3rd one this month. Alessandro doesn't take to strangers." "Alessandro?" Elena repeated softly, looking down at the sleeping child. "That's a beautiful name." "It was my grandfather's." He moved closer, studying his son's peaceful face with an expression that transformed him completely. The dangerous edge remained, But underneath it, Elena glimpsed something raw and vulnerable, a father's desperate love. He hasn't slept in 2 days, the man continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Screams whenever the new nanny tries to touch him. Won't eat, won't sleep, just cries until he makes himself sick. His eyes lifted to Elena's face, and the intensity there made her breath catch. Yet you had him asleep in, what, 5 minutes? I sang to him, an old lullaby my grandmother taught me. Sing it again. It wasn't a request. Elena hesitated, suddenly aware of how bizarre this situation had become. She was sitting in a mansion that probably cost more than she'd earn in 3 lifetimes, holding a stranger's child while that stranger, who looked like he could kill her without breaking a sweat, demanded she perform like some kind of musical servant. But then Alessandro stirred slightly in his sleep, a small whimper escaping, and Elena found herself singing again without conscious decision. Ninna nanna, ninna oh, questo bimbo acilo do. The man's reaction was immediate and shocking. All the color drained from his face. He gripped the back of the nearest chair so hard his knuckles went white, his body going rigid as if she'd struck him. Stop, he commanded, his voice strangled. Stop singing. Elena's voice cut off immediately, her heart racing as she wondered what she'd done wrong. Alessandro shifted in her arms but didn't wake, too exhausted to fully rouse. The man stared at her like she was a ghost, his chest rising and falling with controlled breaths that suggested he was fighting for composure. Where did you learn that song? Each word was carefully measured, as if he was afraid of what the answer might be. My grandmother. She was from a village outside Naples, near Caserta. He finished, his voice barely above a whisper. She was from Caserta. Elena's blood went cold. How did you know that? He moved to the window, his back to her, shoulders tense beneath the expensive suit. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of old grief. My wife was from Caserta. She sang that exact lullaby to Alessandro every night from the day he was born. He turned, and Elena was shocked to see moisture gathering in his eyes, though no tears fell. She died 6 months ago. Car accident. And my son hasn't heard that song since the night before He couldn't finish. Didn't need to. The pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. This wasn't just about a crying baby or a suspicious stranger in his house. This was about a man watching his son forget his mother, unable to soothe the child they'd created together, failing at the one thing that mattered most. I'm so sorry, Elena whispered, the inadequate words all she had to offer. What's your name again? He asked, composing himself with visible effort. Elena Moretti. Dante Rossi. He moved closer, studying her with new intensity. And you learned that song from your grandmother, who was from the same region as my wife, and you just happened to be sent here today, to this house, to this room. I don't believe in coincidences either, Elena said quietly. But sometimes, things just happen. Nothing just happens in my world, Miss Moretti. His expression hardened back into something unreadable. People are placed, situations are arranged, accidents are orchestrated. The underlying threat was clear, but Elena refused to shrink from it. Then maybe you should consider that whatever power you think controls everything decided your son needed to hear his mother's song today. Needed to remember that he's loved, even if she's not here anymore. The words hung between them, bold and presumptuous from a house cleaner to a man who was clearly someone important. Dangerous. Dante Rossi studied her for a long moment, and Elena could practically see him calculating, assessing, deciding what kind of threat or asset she represented. Finally, he spoke. Alessandro will wake soon. When he does, he'll be frightened to find a stranger holding him. He'll cry again, and nothing I do will stop it. His jaw tightened. Unless you're here. I don't understand what you're asking, I'm not asking. He pulled out his phone, typed something rapidly. I'm hiring you, not as cleaning staff, as Alessandro's nanny. Elena's mouth fell open. You can't be serious. You literally just accused me of being some kind of plant sent by your enemies 5 minutes ago. And in those 5 minutes, I watched my son, who hasn't slept peacefully in 6 months, fall asleep in your arms while you sang his mother's song. His expression was immovable. I don't know who you are or why you know that lullaby, but my son needs you. That's all that matters. Mr. Rossi, I'm not qualified to be a nanny. I'm a college student studying early childhood education, yes, but I don't have credentials or experience beyond babysitting. You have the only qualification that matters. You can comfort my son. He named a salary that made Elena's head spin, more than triple what she'd make in a year working multiple jobs. That's insane. That's too much money for... It's what I'm willing to pay to see my son smile again, to hear him laugh instead of cry. Dante's voice dropped, revealing the desperation beneath his controlled exterior. To give him back even a fraction of what he lost when his mother died. Elena looked down at Alessandro's peaceful face, his small hand still gripping her shirt, his breath even and calm. She thought about her tiny apartment, her student loans, her night classes she could barely stay awake for after working all day. But more than that, she thought about this little boy who'd lost his mother, and this father who was clearly drowning in grief and responsibility, and the strange twist of fate that had put her here in this moment. I need to finish my degree, she said finally. I have classes 3 nights a week, and I won't give them up. Something like respect flickered in Dante's eyes. You'll work around your class schedule. Alessandro goes to bed at 7:30. You'll be done by 8. And if this doesn't work, if he wakes up and screams at the sight of me like he did with the other nannies, then you'll have been well compensated for an afternoon of babysitting. But his tone suggested he didn't believe that would happen. Neither did Elena, if she was honest with herself. Something about holding Alessandro felt right in a way she couldn't explain, like pieces of a puzzle she hadn't known existed suddenly clicking into place. I'll need to give my other jobs notice, at least a week. I'll compensate them for the lost wages. You start tomorrow. He pulled out his wallet, extracted a black credit card that probably had no limit. Marco will give you this at the door. Use it to buy anything you need, appropriate clothes, supplies, whatever Alessandro requires. I have clothes. Not for this house, you don't. His eyes swept over her worn jeans and faded t-shirt, not with judgment but simple assessment. You'll be living here Monday through Friday. The staff quarters are on the 2nd floor. Weekends are yours, unless there's an emergency. Living here. The reality of what she was agreeing to suddenly hit Elena with full force. This wasn't just a job. This was complete immersion into a world she didn't understand, working for a man whose very presence screamed danger, caring for a child who'd already lost so much. Mr. Rossi, Dante. If you're going to raise my son, you'll call me Dante. Raise his son. The casual way he said it made Elena's stomach flip. This was far more than she'd bargained for when she'd walked into this nursery. Alessandro stirred in her arms, a small sound escaping as he began the transition toward waking. Elena instinctively began humming the lullaby again, and he settled immediately, his body relaxing back into sleep. Dante watched this with an expression Elena couldn't quite read, pain and hope, and something else. Something that made her pulse quicken in a way that had nothing to do with fear. Tomorrow, he said quietly. Marco will pick you up at 9. Bring whatever you need for the week. I haven't said yes yet. You will. He moved toward the door, then paused. Miss Moretti, thank you for not leaving him to cry alone. And then he was gone, leaving Elena sitting in a nursery that cost more than most houses, holding a sleeping child who'd somehow become her responsibility in the space of 20 minutes. She looked down at Alessandro's peaceful face, his long lashes dark against his cheeks, and wondered what kind of madness she was about to walk into. But when she thought about leaving him, about walking out of this house and never seeing him again, something in her chest ached with unexpected protest. "What have I gotten myself into, little one?" she whispered. Alessandro sighed in his sleep, his small hand tightening around her shirt as if even unconscious, he knew she was considering leaving and was determined to hold on. Elena's decision crystallized in that moment. Maybe it was crazy. Maybe she was walking into something dangerous and complicated. But this baby needed her, and she'd never been able to walk away from someone who needed her. "Okay," she murmured, more to herself than to the sleeping child. "Okay, we'll figure this out, together." Outside the nursery window, the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the manicured grounds in shades of amber and gold. Somewhere in the massive house below, Dante Rossi was probably making phone calls, running background checks, setting whatever wheels in motion that men like him set in motion. But for now, in this quiet moment, Elena just sat and rocked Alessandro, singing softly in Italian, and tried not to think about how dramatically her life had just changed with a single lullaby. The next morning arrived far too quickly. Elena had barely slept, her mind spinning with doubts and second thoughts about the decision she'd made. She'd called her landlord, her current employers, even her academic advisor, setting in motion changes that felt both terrifying and inevitable. Now she stood in front of her bathroom mirror at 6 a.m., studying her reflection with critical eyes. She'd bought one new outfit with the last of her checking account: simple black pants and a cream blouse that looked professional without being too formal. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, her face free of makeup except for a touch of mascara. She looked like someone trying very hard to appear qualified for a job she absolutely wasn't qualified for. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Marco, outside, in 10 minutes. Travel light." Dr. Dante Rossi, the man who'd somehow convinced her to upend her entire life for a child she'd known for less than an hour. Elena grabbed the duffel bag she'd packed last night. Clothes for 5 days, toiletries, her laptop and textbooks for her night classes. Everything else would stay in her apartment. A safety net in case this experiment exploded as spectacularly as it probably would. The black SUV waiting outside her building was exactly what she'd expected. Expensive, intimidating, with windows tinted so dark she couldn't see inside. A man emerged from the driver's side as she approached, tall and built like he'd spent significant time in the military. "Miss Moretti, I'm Marco." His handshake was firm, professional. "I head security for the Rossi family." Security. Of course a man like Dante Rossi would have security. The question was what he needed protection from. The drive to the estate passed in silence, Marco occasionally speaking quietly into a radio, but never engaging in small talk. Elena appreciated it. Her nerves were too frayed for forced conversation. When they pulled through the gates, Elena saw the property with new eyes. Yesterday, she'd been focused on the job, on cleaning and leaving. Today, she noticed the discreet cameras, the strategic positioning of other security personnel, the way the estate sat elevated with clear sightlines in all directions. This wasn't just wealth. This was fortress-level security disguised as elegance. Marco led her through a side entrance, bypassing the grand foyer she'd used yesterday. They climbed stairs to the second floor, walking down a hallway lined with closed doors until he stopped at one near the end. "Your quarters," he said simply, pushing the door open. The room took Elena's breath away. It wasn't large by mansion standards, but compared to her studio apartment it was palatial. A queen bed with crisp white linens, a sitting area with comfortable furniture, a desk positioned by windows overlooking the grounds. A door led to a private bathroom that gleamed with marble and chrome. This is where the staff stays? Elena asked, unable to hide her shock. This is where Mr. Rossi wants you to stay, Marco corrected. There's a difference. Before Elena could ask what that meant, a soft knock came at the open door. A woman in her 50s appeared, her kind face creasing with a warm smile. You must be Elena. I'm Sophia, the head housekeeper. I wanted to welcome you properly before you start with little Alessandro. She handed Elena a folder. House rules, emergency contacts, Alessandro's schedule and dietary restrictions. Mr. Rossi is very particular about routine. Elena flipped through the folder, scanning pages of detailed instructions. Wake time, meal times, nap schedule, bedtime routine. Approved foods, medications, developmental activities. It was simultaneously impressive and slightly overwhelming. Alessandro wakes at 7, Sophia continued. Mr. Rossi usually handles breakfast, but he had early meetings today. The nursery is ready for you whenever you want to start. He's awake now? Elena glanced at her watch, 6:55, and asking for the singing lady, according to Rosa, the overnight nurse. Sophia's smile widened. You made quite an impression yesterday. Elena's heart did something complicated at the thought of Alessandro asking for her. She set down her bag quickly. Where's the nursery? Sophia led her up to the 3rd floor, explaining household logistics as they climbed. Staff schedules, meal times, which areas were off limits without permission. It was a lot to absorb, but Elena focused on memorizing what mattered most: how to keep Alessandro safe and happy. They reached the nursery to find Rosa, a competent-looking woman in scrubs, attempting to calm a fussy Alessandro. The toddler sat in his high chair, tears streaming down his face as he pushed away the sippy cup she offered. He won't take anything, Rosa explained, relief evident as they entered. Been crying on and off since he woke up. But the moment Alessandro saw Elena, his entire demeanor changed. His face lit up, arms reaching toward her with desperate hope. Singing lady. His voice was hoarse from crying, the words barely understandable, but the joy in them was unmistakable. Elena moved to him immediately, her earlier nervousness forgotten in the face of his need. Good morning, sweet boy. Did you have breakfast yet? He shook his head, still reaching for her. Elena lifted him from the high chair, and he immediately wrapped his arms around her neck, burying his face against her shoulder with a contentment that made her chest ache. Okay, let's try this again, she murmured, settling into a chair with him in her lap. Rosa, could you hand me that cup? She began humming the lullaby from yesterday, and Alessandro relaxed into her, his crying stopping completely. When she offered the sippy cup while still humming, he took it without protest, drinking deeply while his free hand twisted in her shirt. Rosa and Sophia exchanged glances that Elena pretended not to notice. She focused on Alessandro, on this small miracle of trust he was offering, and tried not to think about how quickly she was already becoming attached to this motherless child. They'd finished half the cup when the nursery door opened and Dante entered, phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapid Italian. He was dressed for business in a navy suit, his hair still slightly damp from a recent shower. His eyes found his son immediately, something softening in his expression as he took in Alessandro's peaceful state in Elena's arms. He finished his call and approached slowly, as if worried sudden movement might shatter the fragile peace. He's drinking, he noted, surprise evident in his tone. 3rd cup this morning, Rosa confirmed. Wouldn't take any of them from me, but drank 2 full sippy cups with Miss Moretti. Dante crouched beside Elena's chair, bringing himself to eye level with his son. Good morning, Alessandro. Did you sleep well? The toddler turned his head, saw his father, and smiled. A real smile, the first Dante had probably seen in weeks. Papa, singing lady came back. I see that. Dante's voice was thick with emotion he was clearly trying to control. I told you she would. Sing more? Alessandro asked Elena hopefully, his dark eyes so like his father's. Elena glanced at Dante, silently asking permission. He nodded, almost imperceptibly, and she began singing softly in Italian, while Dante watched his son's face with the expression of a man witnessing a miracle. When the song ended, Alessandro's attention had shifted to the toy trucks Sophia had placed nearby. He wiggled to get down, and Elena set him on the playmat where he immediately became absorbed in making engine noises. Dante stood, gesturing for Elena to follow him to the far corner of the room where Alessandro couldn't hear them clearly. "I had you investigated last night," he said without preamble. "Thoroughly." Elena's stomach dropped. And? And you're exactly who you claim to be. No criminal record, good academic standing, references from previous babysitting jobs are all positive. No connections to any of my business competitors or enemies. His eyes studied her carefully. "You're clean. You thought I might not be?" Elena tried to keep the hurt from her voice and failed. "I think that anyone who appears this conveniently, with exactly the skills my son needs, deserves scrutiny." His expression remained unreadable. "That's just survival in my world." "What world is that exactly?" Elena asked, channeling courage she didn't quite feel. "Because yesterday you mentioned enemies and arranged situations, and now you're talking about business competitors like they're threats. I think if I'm going to live in your house and care for your son, I deserve to know what I'm walking into." Dante was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as he apparently debated how much to reveal. Finally, he moved to the window, his back to her, shoulders tense. "My family has business interests throughout the city. Import, export, real estate, entertainment venues." His tone was carefully neutral. "Some of these businesses operate in complicated legal territories." "You're saying you're a criminal?" Elena kept her voice low but firm. "I'm saying I exist in the spaces between laws that don't serve the communities I protect." He turned to face her. "I provide services the system fails to provide. Protection for businesses the police ignore. Resolution for disputes the courts can't handle. Employment for people legitimate companies won't hire." That's a very romanticized way of describing organized crime. His lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. "And organized crime is a very simplistic way of describing a complex economic ecosystem. But yes, Miss Moretti, if you need simple labels, I run what most people would call a criminal organization." Elena should have been shocked, should have grabbed her bag and run. Instead, she found herself thinking about Alessandro playing happily on the floor, about his desperate crying yesterday, about a father who clearly loved his son but existed in a world that might destroy him. "Does this organization put Alessandro in danger?" she asked. "I have more security on this estate than most government buildings. Alessandro is protected better than the president's children." Dante's voice was absolute. "But yes, the life I lead means my son is valuable to my enemies. Why I need to know everyone who gets close to him is trustworthy." "And you've decided I am? Based on one background check?" "Based on the fact that my son smiled this morning for the first time in 6 months. Based on you singing his mother's lullaby without knowing who she was. Based on you asking about his safety before your own." Dante moved closer, his presence overwhelming in a way that had nothing to do with physical size. "I'm trusting you with the most important thing in my life, Elena. Don't make me regret it." The use of her first name sent an unexpected shiver through her. Yesterday, it had been Miss Moretti. Today, with the revelation of who he really was, they'd apparently crossed into territory where formality no longer applied. "I won't hurt him," Elena said firmly. "Whatever else happens, whatever your world involves, I won't let anything hurt Alessandro." "Good." Dante pulled out his phone, showed her a contact. "This is my direct line. Not through assistance or security, if Something's wrong with Alessandro. If you need anything, you call me immediately. Elena saved the number, very aware that she now had direct access to a man who probably had hundreds of people who'd never get this privilege. A crash from across the room made them both turn. Alessandro had knocked over a tower of blocks and was laughing, the sound bright and pure and utterly unself-conscious. The joy on Dante's face as he watched his son was transformative, erasing the hard edges and revealing the father beneath the feared criminal. "I have meetings all day," he said quietly, not looking away from Alessandro. "But I'll be home for dinner. 6:30. Alessandro eats with me when I'm here. I'll have him ready." Dante finally looked at her, and the intensity in his gaze made Elena's breath catch. "Thank you. For coming back. For giving him this." Before Elena could respond, he was moving toward Alessandro, crouching to examine the block tower his son was rebuilding. The toddler chattered happily in that mix of real words and invented language that small children use, and Dante responded seriously, as if they were discussing matters of great importance. Watching them together, Elena felt the last of her doubts crystallize into certainty. Whatever complications lay ahead, whatever dangers came with this world, she was exactly where she needed to be. She just hoped she'd survive whatever came next. The first week passed in a blur of routine and adjustment. Elena settled into Alessandro's schedule with surprising ease, learning his quirks and preferences, discovering what made him laugh and what triggered tears. The lullabies remained their secret language. Whenever he grew fussy or couldn't sleep, she'd sing in Italian and he'd calm immediately, as if his mother's voice echoed through hers. Dante remained a shadowy presence in those early days. He'd appear for breakfast or dinner, spending focused time with Alessandro before disappearing into his study for phone calls, conducted in rapid Italian, or meetings with men in expensive suits who arrived with bodyguards and left looking either satisfied or concerned. Elena learned to read the household's mood by watching the security detail. When Marco and his team moved with casual efficiency, everything was normal. When they tensed, spoke in clipped tones through their radios, positioned themselves more strategically throughout the estate. Those were the days Dante came home late with blood on his knuckles. He thought no one noticed. On Thursday of her second week, Elena was reading to Alessandro in the nursery when Sophia appeared in the doorway, her usually calm expression troubled. "Miss Elena, Mr. Rossi would like to see you in his study. I'll stay with Alessandro." The formal summons sent anxiety through Elena's stomach. In 2 weeks, Dante had never called her to his study. Their interactions happened naturally, passing in hallways, sharing meals, brief conversations about Alessandro's progress. This felt different. Official. She found Marco waiting outside the study door, his expression unreadable as he knocked once before opening it. Dante stood by the windows, staring out at the grounds with the kind of stillness that suggested controlled tension. He turned as she entered, and Elena's breath caught at his expression. Not anger, but something worse. Fear, carefully masked but unmistakable. "Close the door," he said quietly. Marco did, but remained inside, positioning himself near the entrance. Another man Elena didn't recognize stood by the desk, older, with silver hair and a face that had seen violence and survived. "This is Vincent," Dante said. "My head of intelligence. Vincent, Elena Moretti, Alessandro's nanny." Vincent nodded politely, but his eyes assessed her with professional thoroughness. "Miss Moretti, I apologize for the dramatic summons, but we have a situation that requires immediate discussion." Elena's pulse quickened. "What kind of situation?" Dante moved to his desk, pressed a button on his laptop. The large screen on the wall flickered to life, showing a grainy surveillance photo. A man, mid-30s, watching the estate from a car across the street. "This man has been conducting surveillance on the house for 3 days," Dante explained, his voice tight with controlled anger. We've identified him as Luca Castellano, an associate of the Moretti family. Elena's stomach dropped at the name. Moretti. Like, like you, Vincent finished, which is why we need to have this conversation. The implication hit her like ice water. They thought she was connected to whoever the Moretti family was, thought she'd been planted here with malicious intent. I don't know any Morettis except my own family, Elena said firmly, fighting to keep her voice steady. My grandmother, my mother, my uncle in Boston. That's it. We know, Dante said, surprising her. We've traced your entire family tree. You're not connected to the New York Morettis. But they don't know that. He clicked to another image. This one a close-up of the surveillance man on his phone, clearly photographing something. Luca has been taking pictures of you, Vincent continued. Every time you leave the house with Alessandro. Every time you're visible through windows. They're building a profile, which means they've noticed your presence here. Why would they care about me? Elena asked, though dread was already forming an answer. Because you have access to Alessandro, Dante said flatly. You're close to my son, which makes you either an asset they could turn or a threat they need to eliminate. And the name coincidence has them curious whether you're connected to them somehow. The room spun slightly. In 2 weeks, she'd gone from invisible college student to a person of interest to organized criminals. What does this mean? She managed. It means we need to make a decision about your continued employment, Vincent said, his tone professional but not unkind. For your safety and Alessandro's, we have 3 options. Dante's jaw tightened, but he nodded for Vincent to continue. 1. We terminate your employment immediately, pay you handsomely for your discretion, and relocate you somewhere the Morettis won't think to look. You disappear, start fresh, and hopefully they lose interest. No, Dante and Elena said simultaneously. Their eyes met, and something passed between them. Recognition of Alessandro's need, of the fragile happiness they'd built, of how destruction of that would hurt the child they were both trying to protect. 2. Vincent continued, we bring you fully into the inner circle. Enhanced security detail, restricted movements, complete transparency about the family business and its dangers. You'd essentially become part of the organization's protection protocols. And 3? Elena asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Vincent glanced at Dante, who'd turned back to the window, shoulders rigid. 3. We use this situation to our advantage. Let the Morettis think you're connected to them. Possibly even feed them information through you. Use you as an asset in the larger game. Vincent's expression made it clear what he thought of this option. I don't recommend it. Too dangerous. Too many variables. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. Absolutely not, Dante said, his voice cold as winter. She's not becoming a pawn in family politics. The protectiveness in his tone sent unexpected warmth through Elena's chest, even as the gravity of the situation settled over her. Then we're looking at option 2, Vincent concluded, full integration into security protocols, which means Miss Moretti needs to understand exactly what she's signing up for. Elena thought about Alessandro's laughter that morning, about how he'd fallen asleep in her arms during afternoon nap time, about the way Dante's expression softened when he watched his son play. She thought about her tiny apartment sitting empty, her simple life that suddenly felt like it belonged to someone else. Tell me what full integration means, she said quietly, all of it. The next hour was a crash course in the reality of Dante Rossi's world. Vincent laid it out with clinical precision, the territories Dante controlled, the businesses that were legitimate, and those that existed in legal gray zones, the rival families vying for power, the delicate balance of alliances that kept New York's underworld from open warfare. The Moretti family was one of those rivals, Vincent explained. Not direct enemies, but competitors for influence in certain neighborhoods, certain industries. They had a reputation for ruthlessness and for using unconventional tactics, including targeting family members of rivals to gain leverage. If they think you're useful, either as intelligence or leverage, they won't hesitate to make a move, Vincent said bluntly. Which is why if you stay, you don't go anywhere without armed security. Your movements become restricted. Your freedom becomes limited. A cage, Elena said softly. Protection, Dante corrected, finally turning from the window. His expression was carefully neutral, but his eyes held something raw. I won't apologize for keeping people safe. Even if they don't want that level of protection? Even then. He moved closer, his presence overwhelming in the way it always was. But especially if they're caring for my son. Alessandro's safety is non-negotiable. Anyone close to him accepts the security that comes with that proximity. Elena met his gaze directly. And if I can't accept living like a prisoner? Then Vincent will arrange your relocation tonight, and tomorrow Alessandro will wake up screaming for the singing lady who disappeared. His voice was flat, but pain flickered across his features. I'll hire another nanny. She'll last maybe a week before he breaks her too. And my son will learn another lesson about people he loves leaving him. The emotional manipulation should have angered her. Instead, Elena recognized it for what it was. A desperate father's last play to keep the one person who'd brought his child back to life. That's not fair, she said quietly. Nothing about this is fair. Dante's control cracked slightly. My wife is dead. My son barely speaks except when you're singing to him. I run an empire built on violence and fear, and I can't even keep my own family safe without turning our home into a fortress. He stopped, visibly wrestling with emotion. So no, I'm not being fair. I'm being honest about what I need, what Alessandro needs. The vulnerability in his admission hit Elena harder than any threat could have. This wasn't a crime boss issuing orders. This was a father drowning and seeing one lifeline. I need time to think, she said finally. This is a lot to process. You have until tomorrow morning, Vincent said. After that, the Moretti's interest will require a response one way or another. Marco escorted Elena back to the nursery, where Sophia was reading to Alessandro. The toddler's face lit up when he saw her, and he immediately wiggled free to run to her, wrapping his small arms around her legs. Singing lady, you came back. His words were an echo of that first morning, and they broke something in Elena's chest. In just 2 weeks, she'd become essential to this child's fragile sense of security. Walking away now would hurt him in ways he was too young to process but old enough to feel deeply. That night, after Alessandro was asleep, Elena stood in her room staring out at the manicured grounds, lit by strategic floodlights and patrolled by security she now noticed everywhere. Her phone buzzed with a text from her roommate back at her old apartment, asking when she'd be by to pick up more clothes. That life felt like a dream now. Classes and coffee shops and worrying about rent. Simple problems, human-sized concerns. What Dante was offering, or demanding really, was something else entirely. A life circumscribed by bodyguards and restricted movements, by knowledge of criminal enterprises and complicity through silence. A gilded cage, no matter how comfortable. But inside that cage was a little boy who needed her. And, Elena was beginning to admit to herself, a man whose rare smiles made her pulse race in ways that had nothing to do with fear. A soft knock at her door made her turn. Dante stood in the hallway, still in his dress shirt but with the tie gone and sleeves rolled up. He looked exhausted, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. I shouldn't be here, he said. This is inappropriate. You're my employee, you're under pressure, and I'm... He stopped, running a hand through his hair. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for putting you in this position. Are you? Elena asked. Sorry enough to let me go without the guilt trip about Alessandro? No. His honesty was startling. I'm sorry you're in danger because of us. I'm not sorry about fighting to keep you here. He leaned against the door frame, maintaining respectful distance. Do you know what it's like? Watching your child slip away from you? Seeing him fade more each day? Knowing you're failing at the one thing that matters? I can't imagine. And then you appear, singing the song his mother sang, and suddenly he's back. He's laughing again, eating, sleeping. Dante's voice roughened. You gave me my son back, Elena. I can't lose that. I can't lose him again. So you'll cage me to keep it? I'll protect you to keep you safe. There's a difference. His eyes held hers. I know you don't understand my world yet. The way we do things. The reason security isn't optional but necessary. But I'm asking you to trust that every restriction comes from experience with what happens when we're not careful enough. What happened to Alessandro's mother? Elena asked quietly. You said car accident, but was it really? Dante's expression shuddered. That's not a conversation for tonight. If you want me to accept living under guard, I think I deserve to know what I'm being protected from. He was quiet for so long Elena thought he might leave without answering. Finally, he stepped into her room, closing the door behind him. Inappropriate, yes, but creating privacy they needed. Her name was Julia, he said softly. We met in Naples when I was there on business. She was a violinist, performed in small venues around the city. Beautiful, talented, everything I didn't deserve. His expression turned distant with memory. She knew what my family was, chose to love me anyway. We married, had Alessandro, and for 3 years I had something I never thought possible. A real family. Peace. What happened? Elena asked, though dread was already forming the answer. The Castellano family happened. They wanted to expand into territory my father had controlled for decades. When negotiation failed, they decided to send a message. His jaw tightened. Julia was driving home from a performance. They ran her car off the road, made it look like she lost control. She died at the scene. Elena's hand flew to her mouth. Oh God. Alessandro was with my mother that night. Thank Christ. But he saw her in the hospital before. Dante's voice broke slightly. He was old enough to remember, old enough to understand Mama wasn't coming home, and not old enough to understand why. I'm so sorry, Elena whispered, inadequate words for unbearable loss. So when I say security is necessary, when I put guards on you and restrict your movements, it's not control. His eyes burned with intensity. It's me doing everything in my power to make sure Alessandro doesn't lose someone else he loves. The weight of that responsibility settled over Elena like a physical thing. She wasn't just a nanny anymore. She was a potential target, a vulnerability in Dante's armor, a risk that needed to be managed. But she was also the person who made Alessandro laugh, who sang him to sleep, who'd somehow, impossibly, become essential to a family that had already lost so much. If I stay, she said slowly, I need to understand the rules completely. What I can and can't do. Where I can and can't go. I need honesty, Dante. Not protection through ignorance. Relief flooded his features. You're staying? I'm considering staying, but only if we do this right. Full transparency about the dangers. No surprises. No, this is for your own good without explanation. She held his gaze. I'm choosing to walk into this. That means I get to know what I'm walking into. Dante moved closer, and Elena caught the scent of his cologne mixed with something uniquely him. Tomorrow, Vincent will brief you on everything. The families, the territories, the specific threats. You'll meet the full security team, learn protocols, understand exactly what protection looks like. And Alessandro? Does he know any of this? He's 18 months old. He knows Papa has friends who work for him, that Marco and the others keep us safe. When he's older, he'll learn the rest. Dante's expression turned fierce. But he'll also learn that family is everything, that we protect our own, that love isn't weakness, it's what we fight for. The passion in his voice sent warmth through Elena's chest. This was why she was staying, she realized. Not just for Alessandro, but for this complicated, dangerous, devoted man who loved his son more than his own life. Okay, she said softly. I'll stay. We'll figure out how to make this work. Dante's smile was like sunrise, rare and transformative. Without thinking, he reached out and cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing across her skin with unexpected gentleness. Thank you, he murmured, for giving us this chance. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. Then Dante seemed to realize what he was doing, his hand dropping away as he stepped back to professional distance. I should go. You need rest, and I have early meetings. He moved to the door, paused. Elena, welcome to the family, for better or worse. After he left, Elena sat on her bed, her cheek still warm from his touch, and wondered what exactly she'd just agreed to. The next 3 weeks were intensive training in survival within Dante's world. Vincent proved to be a thorough, if intimidating, teacher, walking Elena through the complex web of alliances and enmities that governed New York's underworld. She learned the territories, who controlled what neighborhoods, which businesses were legitimate fronts, and which were actual enterprises. She learned the players, the Castellanos who'd killed Julia, the Morettis who were watching her now, the De Lucas who maintained uneasy alliance with Dante's family, and half a dozen smaller organizations vying for power. Knowledge is protection, Vincent explained during one session. If you know who the threats are, you're less likely to stumble into danger unknowingly. Marco took over her security training. She learned to recognize surveillance, to identify potential threats, to move through public spaces with awareness of exits and potential dangers. She learned what to do if separated from her security detail, how to use the panic button built into her phone, where the safe rooms were located in the estate. You're not a prisoner, Marco said firmly during one particularly intense session. You're a protected asset. There's a difference. Prisoners can't choose to stay. You can walk away anytime. We just make sure you're safe while you're here. But the training was more than practical skills. It was psychological preparation for a life she'd never imagined living. Elena sat through meetings where Dante discussed business arrangements that she knew involved illegal activities. She overheard phone calls about problems being handled and learned not to ask what that meant. She watched men arrive and leave with the kind of tension that suggested violence simmering just beneath the surface. And through it all, Alessandro remained her anchor to something pure and uncomplicated. His laughter when she sang to him, his excitement at simple games, his absolute trust in her care. These were the reasons she stayed when the weight of this new reality threatened to overwhelm her. Dante watched her navigate this transition with visible relief, tinged with guilt. Their interactions shifted into something more personal than employer-employee, though neither acknowledged it directly. He'd appear in the nursery during his lunch breaks just to watch her play with Alessandro. They'd share late dinners after his son was asleep, conversations ranging from Alessandro's developmental progress to Dante's childhood in Naples, to Elena's dreams of eventually opening a preschool. In those quiet moments, Elena glimpsed the man beneath the crime boss, intelligent, thoughtful, surprisingly well-read, with a dry humor that emerged when he let his guard down. She found herself looking forward to these conversations more than she wanted to admit. But the outside threat remained constant. The Moretti surveillance continued, and Vincent's weekly briefings made it clear their interest in Elena was intensifying rather than fading. They're trying to establish contact, Vincent explained during one morning meeting, 3 weeks into Elena's full integration. 2 attempts to approach you during your morning walks with Alessandro, both deterred by Marco's presence. 1 inquiry to your former roommate about your current location. Elena's stomach tightened. They're not going to just lose interest, are they? No, Dante said flatly. He stood by the window, coffee in hand, jaw tight with frustration. They think you're an opening, a way to get close to Alessandro, to me. They won't stop until we make it clear that avenue is closed. How do we do that? Elena asked. Vincent and Dante exchanged looks that suggested they'd already discussed this. We make your position in this family unambiguous, Dante said carefully. Right now, you're the nanny. Valued, yes, but ultimately replaceable in their eyes. We need to make it clear you're more than that. Elena's pulse quickened. What does that mean? It means we take you to the DeLuca wedding this weekend. Dante set down his coffee, turning to face her fully. Major families will be there. We arrive together, as a family unit. Me, you, Alessandro. We make it publicly clear that you're under my personal protection, not just an employee. You want me to pretend to be your... Elena couldn't quite finish the sentence. Not pretend, Dante corrected quietly. You're already part of this family. We just make it official in the eyes of everyone who matters. 1 public appearance where it's clear you belong to us, that any threat to you is a threat to the Rossi family directly. Vincent nodded. It's the most efficient way to establish your protected status. The families respect certain boundaries, cross them, and you're starting a war. If they believe you're romantically involved with Dante, they won't touch you without extraordinary cause. Elena's mind spun. This is insane. We barely know each other. We've spent nearly every evening together for a month, Dante pointed out. Alessandro adores you. My mother calls weekly just to ask about you. The household staff already treats you like the lady of the house. His expression softened. Would pretending to care about you really be such a stretch? The vulnerability beneath the practical question made Elena's breath catch. This wasn't just strategy. There was something real underneath, something they'd both been carefully not acknowledging. And after the wedding? Elena asked quietly. When the threat passes? Do we just stop? Pretending? Dante moved closer, his presence overwhelming in the way that made her pulse race. That would be entirely up to you. The implication hung between them, heavy with possibility. I need to think about this, Elena managed. We leave Saturday at 4, Vincent said, standing. That gives you 2 days to decide. But understand, if you don't go, the Morettis will interpret that as you being unimportant, expendable, and their interest will shift from surveillance to more direct action. After they left, Elena sat in the study, her mind racing through impossible choices. Pretend to be Dante's romantic interest to secure protection from criminals. Attend a mob wedding as his date. Cross a line that would make their relationship something they could never uncross. But the alternative was remaining vulnerable, being expendable, potentially putting Alessandro at risk if the Morettis decided to use her as leverage. She found Alessandro in the playroom, building block towers with the kind of serious concentration only toddlers could achieve. He looked up when she entered, his face lighting up with pure joy. Singing lady, help build? Elena settled beside him, helping stack blocks while he chattered about the castle they were making. His small hands worked carefully, his tongue poking out slightly in concentration. When the tower fell, he laughed with delight rather than frustration, already planning the next attempt. This child had lost his mother, had spent months drowning in grief too complex for his young mind to process. And somehow, impossibly, Elena had become his anchor back to joy. Could she really risk that by refusing to play the role Dante needed her to play? That evening, after Alessandro was asleep, Elena found Dante in his study, reviewing documents that he quickly set aside when she entered. I'll go, she said, without preamble. To the wedding. I'll play the role you need me to play. Relief and something deeper flashed across his face. You're sure? No. But I'm certain that I won't let Alessandro lose someone else because I was too scared to do what was necessary. She moved further into the room. But I have conditions. Name them. Honesty. If this is just strategy, you tell me. If it becomes something more, you tell me. I won't be kept in the dark about where I stand. Her voice was firmer than she felt. And Alessandro comes first. Always. If this arrangement puts him at risk in any way, we end it immediately. Dante stood, moving around his desk to face her directly. Agreed. But I have a condition too. Which is? You stop thinking of yourself as the help. You're not my employee anymore, Elena. You're... He stopped, seeming to search for the right words. Your family. The woman raising my son. Someone I trust with everything that matters. Start seeing yourself the way I see you. And how do you see me? Elena asked, her heart hammering. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. Like someone I didn't know I was looking for until you walked into my son's nursery and sang his mother's lullaby. His hand came up, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with gentle precision. Like someone worth protecting, worth keeping, worth... He didn't finish. Didn't need to. The intensity in his gaze said everything his words couldn't. Dante. Elena breathed, not sure if it was warning or invitation. I know. Too fast. Too complicated, too dangerous. He let his hand drop, but didn't step back. But nothing about us has been simple from the beginning. Why start now? Before Elena could respond, before she could make a decision she might regret, Alessandro's cry echoed through the monitor on Dante's desk. Not the desperate sobs from weeks ago, just a normal toddler waking from a dream and wanting comfort. The moment between them broke, and Elena turned toward the door. I should go, Dante finished. He needs you. She was halfway to the nursery when she realized something profound had shifted. This wasn't about survival anymore, or security protocols, or protecting Alessandro from loss. This was about a family being rebuilt from broken pieces, and Elena finding herself becoming one of those pieces whether she'd planned to or not. In the nursery, Alessandro reached for her immediately, his small body relaxing into her embrace as she began humming his lullaby. But as he drifted back to sleep, Elena found herself thinking not about the child in her arms, but about the man downstairs and the dangerous territory they were about to cross together. Saturday couldn't come fast enough, and yet arrived far too quickly. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of nervous energy that made the entire estate feel different. Elena woke early, her stomach a knot of anxiety about the evening ahead. The DeLuca wedding wasn't just a social event. It was a stage where New York's criminal elite would gather, where alliances were displayed and power dynamics played out in expensive suits and designer gowns. And she was expected to walk into it on Dante Rossi's arm, pretending to be something she wasn't sure they were pretending about anymore. A knock at her door revealed Sophia, arms full of garment bags and boxes. Mr. Rossi had these sent for you, she explained, laying everything carefully on Elena's bed. He wanted to ensure you had everything you needed for tonight. The dress was stunning, deep emerald silk that would complement her dark hair and olive skin, elegant without being ostentatious. Shoes that probably cost more than her former monthly rent. Jewelry that looked antique and priceless. He has good taste, Sophia said with a knowing smile. Though I suspect he had help from his mother. She called 3 times yesterday with opinions. His mother? Elena had heard Dante mention her, but never met her. Lucia Rossi. She lives in Naples but keeps close tabs on her son and grandson. Sophia's expression turned warm. She's been asking to meet you for weeks. Dante keeps putting her off, saying it's too soon. But between you and me, I think he's afraid she'll scare you away. The idea of Dante being afraid of anything seemed absurd, but Elena filed that information away for later consideration. The day passed in strange rhythm. Alessandro sensed something different, growing clingy and fussy in a way he hadn't been in weeks. Elena spent the afternoon singing to him, playing his favorite games, trying to soothe anxieties he was too young to articulate but old enough to feel. "Papa going away?" he asked during nap time, his small hand gripping her shirt. "No, sweetheart. Papa and I are going to a party tonight, but we'll be back. And you'll stay here with Sophia and Marco, and they'll take such good care of you." Elena stroked his dark curls. "And when you wake up tomorrow, we'll make pancakes together. Okay?" He nodded against her chest, but his grip didn't loosen. Eventually, he drifted to sleep, still holding on to her, as if afraid she might disappear. By 6 o'clock, Elena was dressed and staring at her reflection with something close to panic. The woman in the mirror looked sophisticated, elegant, like someone who belonged in Dante's world. But underneath the silk and careful makeup, she was still just a college student who'd stumbled into something far beyond her understanding. Another knock. This time, it was Dante himself, and the sight of him made Elena's breath catch. He wore a tailored tuxedo that probably cost more than a car, his dark hair styled back, the scar on his face somehow making him more rather than less attractive. But it was his expression when he saw her that made her pulse race, surprise melting into something heated and undeniably real. "You look—" He stopped, seeming to search for adequate words. "Incredible. Sophia said you picked this out." Elena gestured to the dress. "With significant input from my mother, who has apparently decided you're exactly what this family needs." A wry smile touched his lips. "She's rarely wrong about these things." He pulled a small box from his jacket pocket, opening it to reveal a stunning necklace, diamonds and emeralds that caught the light with breathtaking brilliance. "This was Julia's," he said quietly. "She wore it to our wedding. I want you to have it tonight." Elena's throat tightened. "Dante, I can't. That's too personal, too—" She told me before she died that if I ever found someone else, someone who loved Alessandro the way she did, I should give them the things that mattered to her. His eyes held Elena's. "She'd want you to wear this, to be part of continuing what she started." The weight of that gift, not just jewelry but permission, blessing, made Elena's eyes sting with tears she couldn't let fall without ruining her makeup. "Turn around," Dante said softly. She did, feeling the cool weight of the necklace settle against her skin, his fingers brushing her neck as he fastened the clasp. The intimacy of the gesture sent shivers through her, and when she turned back, she found him watching her with an intensity that had nothing to do with strategy or protection. "We should establish some ground rules," Elena said, needing to anchor this in something practical. "For tonight. What's expected, how far this pretense goes. I'll introduce you as someone important to me and to Alessandro. People will make their own assumptions." Dante straightened his cufflinks, a gesture Elena had learned meant he was working to maintain control. "I'll keep you close, which is both for show and for safety. Vincent and Marco's team will be positioned throughout the venue. And when people ask about us, about our relationship, tell them the truth, that you came into our lives when Alessandro needed you most, and you've become essential to this family." His gaze held hers. "The rest is nobody's business but ours." The implication that there was a rest to discuss made Elena's stomach flutter. They checked on Alessandro one final time before leaving. He was playing in the den with Sophia, building elaborate structures with his blocks. When he saw Dante and Elena dressed up, his eyes went wide. "Papa fancy, singing lady pretty." Dante crouched to his son's level. "Be good for Sophia. Papa will be home before you wake up." Alessandro nodded seriously, then threw his arms around his father's neck. "Love you, Papa." "Love you too, tesoro." Dante's voice was thick with emotion as he held his son close. Then Alessandro turned to Elena, reaching for her. She bent carefully in her dress, letting him hug her tight. "Sing tomorrow?" he asked hopefully. "Every day," she promised. "Now be good, okay?" The ride to the wedding venue, an exclusive estate in the Hamptons, took just over an hour. Marco drove while 2 additional SUVs full of security followed at discreet distances. In the privacy of the back seat, Dante's hand found Elena's, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm. "You don't have to be nervous," he said quietly. "You'll be the most genuine person in that room. Everyone else is playing roles they've perfected over decades. Your honesty will be refreshing. Or it'll make me look naive and out of place. It'll make you look like exactly what you are, someone good in a world that desperately needs more goodness." He squeezed her hand. "Just stay close to me. I'll handle the politics." The venue was spectacular. A historic mansion lit with thousands of lights, luxury cars lining the circular drive, men in tuxedos, and women in couture gowns streaming through massive doors. Elena felt like she'd stepped into a movie, except the danger here was real, and the consequences permanent. Marco opened their door and Dante stepped out first, then turned to offer Elena his hand. The moment her heels touched the pavement, she felt eyes turning toward them. Curiosity, calculation, speculation, all focused on the unknown woman on Dante Rossi's arm. Dante kept her hand in his, tucking it into the crook of his elbow as they climbed the stairs. "Head up," he murmured. "You belong here because I say you belong here. That's all that matters." The ballroom was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers, live orchestra, tables decorated with flowers that probably cost more than Elena's former annual salary. But what struck her most was the undercurrent of tension beneath the elegance. These weren't just wealthy people celebrating a wedding. These were criminals conducting business under the guise of social occasion. Dante navigated the room with practiced ease, introducing Elena to a dizzying array of people. The De Luca family, including the bride's father, Antonio, who greeted Dante with the kind of embrace that suggested both genuine affection and careful political alliance. "And this must be the woman we've been hearing about," Antonio said, his keen eyes assessing Elena thoroughly. "The one who's brought young Alessandro back to life." "Elena Moretti," Dante said, his hand settling possessively on her lower back. "She's become essential to my family." The phrasing was deliberate, Elena realized. Not my son's nanny, not my employee, my family. Antonio's expression shifted to understanding. "Ah, well then. Welcome, Miss Moretti. Anyone who brings joy back to the Rossi household has my respect." As they moved through the crowd, Elena noticed the pattern. Some people greeted them with warmth, clearly allies or friends of Dante's family. Others were coldly polite, rivals maintaining civility in neutral territory. And a few watched with barely concealed hostility that made Elena grateful for Marco's presence shadowing them from a discreet distance. They'd been there perhaps 30 minutes when Elena felt Dante's body tense beside her. She followed his gaze to a group of men across the room, older, expensively dressed, watching them with calculating interest. "The Morettis," Dante said quietly. "Don't react. Just stay close." The group was led by a silver-haired man with sharp features and eyes like a hawk. He moved toward them with deliberate purpose, his associates flanking him in a formation that was probably strategic. "Rossi," the man said, his tone civil but lacking warmth. "I wondered if we'd see you here." "Giovanni." Dante's voice was carefully neutral. "Congratulations on your nephew's engagement." Giovanni Moretti's eyes shifted to Elena with undisguised interest. "And who is this lovely young woman? I don't believe we've been introduced." "Elena Moretti," Dante said, emphasizing her last name. "Though I suspect you already know that, given the surveillance your people have been conducting." The accusation was bold, and Elena felt the temperature of the conversation drop several degrees. Giovanni's smile didn't reach his eyes. Moretti, he repeated. Interesting coincidence. Any relation to the family? No, Elena said firmly, finding her voice despite her racing heart. My family is from southern Italy, no connection to New York families. Pity, I thought perhaps you were a distant cousin we'd lost track of. Giovanni's tone was pleasant, but the threat underneath was clear. It's always good to know where people's loyalties lie. Her loyalties, Dante said coldly, lie with me and my son, as should be obvious to anyone with eyes. The possessiveness in his voice was unmistakable, and Elena saw understanding dawn on Giovanni's face. This wasn't just about a nanny or employee. Dante was claiming her publicly, drawing a line that Giovanni would cross at significant risk. I see. Giovanni's expression remained neutral, but his eyes glittered with calculation. Well then, congratulations, Rossi. It's good to see you moving forward after your loss. Giulia was a remarkable woman. I hope Miss Moretti understands what shoes she's filling. The subtle barb about Giulia made Dante's jaw tighten, but before he could respond, another voice cut through the tension. Giovanni, stop being insufferable and leave the children alone. An elderly woman approached, tiny but commanding, with silver hair and eyes remarkably similar to Dante's. She was dressed in elegant black, jewelry that was clearly antique and priceless, and moved with the kind of authority that made even Giovanni Moretti step back slightly. Nonna Lucia, Dante said, surprise and relief evident in his voice. I didn't know you were coming. Clearly, or you would have introduced me to this young woman already instead of making me fly across an ocean to meet her at a wedding. Lucia Rossi's sharp eyes fixed on Elena with penetrating assessment. So you're the one who sings to my great-grandson? Elena's mouth went dry. This was Dante's mother, the woman Sophia had mentioned, and her presence here was clearly not coincidental. Yes, ma'am. I'm Elena. I know who you are. I've had detailed reports. Lucia moved closer, studying Elena's face with an intensity that was unnerving. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled, warm and genuine. You have kind eyes, and you're wearing Julia's necklace, which tells me everything I need to know about my son's intentions. Madre, Dante warned, but there was affection in his tone. Lucia ignored him, taking Elena's hands in hers. Walk with me, child. Let the men conduct their tiresome business while we get to know each other properly. It wasn't a request. Elena glanced at Dante, who nodded almost imperceptibly, and then she was being led away by this formidable woman, while Marco and another guard followed at discreet distance. Lucia guided them to a quieter terrace overlooking gardens lit by strings of lights. Once they were alone, or as alone as anyone got with security present, she turned to Elena with piercing directness. My son is falling in love with you. Do you know that? Elena's breath caught. We haven't. It's complicated. Love always is, especially in families like ours. Lucia settled onto a bench, gesturing for Elena to join her. I need to know if you're strong enough for what comes with loving a man like Dante. Smart enough to survive in this world. Brave enough to stand beside him when everything goes to hell, which it inevitably will. I'm not sure I know the answer to any of that, Elena admitted quietly. Good. Certainty is dangerous. It makes you careless. Lucia studied her with those sharp eyes. Tell me about the lullaby, the one you sang to Alessandro. Elena explained about her grandmother, about growing up hearing those old Neapolitan songs, about the strange coincidence that her nonna and Giulia had known the same melodies from the same region. Lucia listened intently, and when Elena finished, the older woman's expression had softened. Not a coincidence. My mother-in-law, Dante's grandmother, she always said the old songs carry souls forward, that when someone sings them, they're keeping the dead alive. She touched Elena's hand gently. You didn't just sing to Alessandro. You brought his mother back to him, in the only way possible. Tears stung Elena's eyes. I never meant to replace her. You can't replace her, but you can stand beside her memory, honor it by loving her son. Lucia's voice was firm but kind. That's what Julia would want. For Alessandro to be loved, for Dante to be happy again. She told me that before she died, made me promise to make sure Dante didn't drown in grief. What was she like? Elena asked softly. Lucia smiled, memories softening her features. Fierce, talented, stubborn as hell, which she needed to be to manage my son. She loved music more than anything except her family. Her eyes met Elena's directly. You remind me of her in some ways. Not the same, but the same kind of strength underneath the softness. Before Elena could respond, Marco appeared at the terrace entrance, his expression urgent. Mrs. Rossi? Miss Moretti, we need to move inside. There's been a development. The professional concern in his voice sent alarm through Elena. Lucia stood immediately, transforming from warm grandmother to alert matriarch. What kind of development? The Castellanos just arrived, uninvited. Lucia's expression hardened into something dangerous. Get Elena to Dante, now. Marco escorted them back through the ballroom, which had taken on a different energy, tension rippling through conversations, people positioning themselves strategically, alliances becoming visible through physical proximity. Elena found Dante near the center of the room, surrounded by Vincent, Antonio De Luca, and several other men she recognized from introductions. His expression was carefully controlled, but she could see the fury burning beneath as he listened to Vincent's low, urgent report. He saw her approaching and immediately moved to her side, his arm wrapping around her waist protectively. You're okay? I'm fine. Your mother said something about the Castellanos? They weren't on the guest list, Dante said tightly. Their presence here is a direct provocation, a statement that they don't respect the neutrality of this event. What do they want? To make a point, to challenge our position, to... He stopped as a new group entered the ballroom and Elena felt him go rigid beside her. The man leading the group was perhaps 60, distinguished in the way powerful men often were, but with eyes that held pure calculation and zero warmth. Behind him walked younger men, sons or lieutenants, all carrying themselves with barely concealed aggression. That's Victor Castellano, Dante said quietly, the man who ordered my wife's death. The words sent ice through Elena's veins. This was the enemy, the reason for all the security, the man responsible for Alessandro growing up without a mother. Victor's eyes scanned the room and landed on Dante with deliberate focus. He moved toward them with the confidence of a man who feared no consequences, his entourage clearing a path through the crowd. Rossi, Victor said, his voice carrying just enough to be heard by nearby guests. I heard rumors you'd found comfort after your tragic loss. Wanted to see for myself. The implication was crude, insulting, designed to provoke. Dante's body tensed like a coiled spring, and Elena felt genuine fear that violence might erupt right here in this elegant ballroom. But Dante's response was coldly controlled. Castellano, I'm surprised Antonio allowed you entry after you crashed his nephew's celebration. Antonio and I have an understanding. Victor's smile was predatory. Besides, I wanted to pay my respects to the bride, and to meet this young woman everyone's been talking about. His eyes shifted to Elena with unsettling focus. Elena Moretti, the nanny who's become so much more. Leave her out of this, Dante said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. Why would I do that? She's part of your family now, isn't she? That makes her relevant to our business. Victor stepped closer, ignoring the way Marco and other security personnel had shifted position around them. Tell me, Miss Moretti, do you know how Rossi's first wife died? Don't, Dante warned, but Victor ignored him. Car accident, they called it. Very tragic. Of course, accidents happen so easily, especially to women involved with dangerous men. His smile was cruel. I do hope you drive carefully, Miss Moretti. The roads can be treacherous. The threat was unmistakable, and Elena felt Dante's entire body vibrate with barely restrained fury. This was the moment, she realized, where everything could explode, where years of controlled hostility could erupt into open war. But before Dante could respond, Elena found her voice, steadier than she felt, carrying across the space between them with unexpected force. I appreciate your concern for my safety, Mr. Castellano, though I find it interesting that you'd worry about accidents when you have such a reputation for causing them. She held his gaze despite the fear coursing through her. But I'm well protected. Dante makes sure of that. He doesn't make the same mistake twice. The implication that Julia's death had been Dante's mistake to avoid rather than Victor's crime was a subtle shift that redirected the conversation while defending Dante's reputation. And calling him Dante rather than Mr. Rossi reinforced their intimate connection. Victor's eyes narrowed, reassessing her. Brave words for a schoolgirl playing house with criminals. I'm not playing, Elena said quietly. And I'm not a child. I'm exactly where I choose to be, with the family I choose to protect. The statement hung in the charged air between them. Elena had just publicly declared her loyalty, her commitment, in front of witnesses from every major family. There was no taking it back. Lucia chose that moment to appear at Elena's other side, her small frame somehow commanding despite being half the size of the men surrounding them. Victor. Still compensating for your inadequacies by threatening women, I see. Some things never change. Lucia. Victor's tone cooled several degrees. I didn't realize you'd be attending. I go where my family goes, and this, she gestured to Elena and Dante, is my family. Touch her, threaten her, even look at her wrong, and you'll answer to me personally. And unlike my son, I don't bother with rules or restraint. I'll burn your entire organization to the ground and dance on the ashes. The ballroom had gone nearly silent, everyone within earshot riveted by the confrontation. Antonio De Luca moved into the group, his expression diplomatically neutral, but his positioning clearly supporting Dante's side. Gentlemen, ladies, we're at a wedding, Antonio said firmly. Whatever grievances exist between families, they'll be addressed through proper channels. Not here, not tonight. Victor, either congratulate my nephew and enjoy the celebration, or leave. Those are your only options. It was a direct order from the host, impossible to refuse without causing an incident that would unite other families against the Castellanos. Victor recognized the corner he'd been backed into, and his expression turned calculating. Of course. I apologize for any discomfort. His eyes swept across Dante, Elena, and Lucia with barely concealed hostility. We were just leaving anyway. The company here isn't to our taste. He turned and departed, his entourage following, and the ballroom slowly returned to normal conversation levels. But the damage was done. Lines had been drawn publicly, positions declared, threats made that couldn't be taken back. Dante pulled Elena closer, his hand shaking slightly where it rested on her waist. You shouldn't have engaged him. You should have let me handle it. He was using me to provoke you. I wasn't going to stand there and let him. Elena looked up at him, seeing the mix of fury and fear and something else in his eyes. We're in this together, remember? That means I stand beside you, not behind you. That was either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish, Vincent said, appearing at Dante's shoulder. Either way, it worked. You've just made yourself unmistakably part of the Rossi family in the eyes of everyone here. Which means she's also made herself a target, Dante said tightly. Victor won't forget this. Victor wasn't going to leave her alone anyway, Lucia interjected. At least now he knows exactly what he'd be starting if he moved against her. That buys protection. not danger. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations, people approaching to acknowledge Elena's place in Dante's family, offering alliances, or simply expressing respect for her courage in standing up to Victor Castellano. She smiled, made polite conversation, and tried not to think about how completely her life had just changed. She'd crossed a line tonight, publicly, irrevocably, in front of witnesses who would spread the story through New York's underworld by morning. There was no going back to being just the nanny, just the college student trying to pay her bills. She was Dante Rossi's woman now, whether that relationship was real or performance. And all the danger that came with that position was now her reality. They left shortly after midnight, exhaustion and emotional overload finally catching up. The ride home was quiet, Lucia dozing in the front seat while Dante held Elena's hand in the back, his thumb tracing absent patterns on her palm. "You were incredible tonight," he said softly. "The way you stood up to Victor, the way you handled the politics and pressure. I've never seen anything like it. I was terrified the entire time." "I know, which makes it even more impressive." He lifted her hand, pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "Thank you. For standing beside me. For protecting our family." Our family. The possessive made Elena's heart skip. When they arrived home, it was nearly 2 a.m. Sophia reported that Alessandro had gone to sleep easily and hadn't woken. They checked on him anyway, standing together at the crib rail, watching him sleep with the kind of peace only children achieve. "He's safe because of you," Dante whispered. "We both are." Elena turned to find him watching her instead of his son, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. This was the moment, she realized, the moment where they either maintained the fiction or acknowledged what had become undeniably real. "Dante." He silenced her with a kiss that was nothing like she'd imagined, not aggressive or demanding, but gentle, questioning, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When she didn't, when she instead leaned into him, his hand came up to cup her face with devastating tenderness. They broke apart slowly, both breathing hard, foreheads touching in the dim light of the nursery. "I don't want to pretend anymore," Dante murmured. "I don't want you to be just Alessandro's nanny or just strategic protection. I want—" He stopped, struggling with words. "I want you to be mine, really mine. If that's something you could want too." Elena thought about all the reasons this was insane. They'd known each other 6 weeks. He was a criminal. She was supposed to be finishing college and building a normal life. Every rational thought said this would end in disaster. But when she looked into his eyes, when she remembered Alessandro's laughter and Lucia's fierce blessing, and the way Dante had held his son with such desperate love, rationality felt less important than the truth beating in her chest. "I want that too," she whispered. "God help me. I want exactly that." His kiss this time was deeper, more certain, carrying the weight of a promise neither of them was entirely sure they could keep. But in that moment, with Alessandro sleeping peacefully beside them and dawn approaching beyond the windows, it felt like enough. The next 3 months were the happiest and most terrifying of Elena's life. She and Dante navigated their new relationship with careful balance, moments of genuine connection between the constant awareness of danger lurking at the edges of their world. Victor Castellano had taken Elena's public defiance personally. Vincent's briefings made that clear as surveillance reports showed increased interest in Elena's movements, patterns, vulnerabilities. Dante responded by tightening security until Elena sometimes felt like she couldn't breathe without a bodyguard noticing. But there were perfect moments too. Alessandro calling her Mama Elena for the first time, his small face shining with love and certainty. Dante teaching her to dance in the living room after Alessandro was asleep, his hands gentle despite their capacity for violence. Lucia visiting from Naples and embracing Elena like a daughter. sharing stories of Julia that honored the past while blessing the future. Elena had withdrawn from college. Temporarily, she insisted, though Dante had already begun talking about private tutors and finishing her degree from home. Her old life felt like a dream, something that had happened to someone else. She was part of the Rossi family now, for better or worse. And as December approached, bringing Alessandro's second birthday and the year anniversary of Giulia's death, Elena began to understand what that truly meant. The threat had been building for weeks. Vincent's intelligence suggested Victor was planning something major: retaliation for perceived slights, a power play to demonstrate the Castellanos' strength. Dante had increased security across all his operations, pulled back from certain territories, tried to avoid giving Victor any excuse for open conflict. But on a cold Tuesday morning, everything changed. Elena was giving Alessandro breakfast when Marco burst into the kitchen, his expression more alarmed than she'd ever seen. "We need to move you both to the safe room, now." "What's happening?" Elena asked, already lifting Alessandro from his high chair. "Dante's warehouse in Red Hook. There's been an explosion. Multiple casualties." Marco was already guiding them toward the concealed door that led to the reinforced room beneath the estate. "We don't know if this is the start of a larger attack." Elena's blood went cold. "Is Dante? He's safe. He wasn't there when it happened. But he's heading to the scene now. And we need you and Alessandro secure before he arrives." The safe room was exactly what it sounded like. A reinforced space with supplies, communications equipment, and enough security to withstand a siege. Alessandro sensed the tension, clinging to Elena and whimpering as Marco sealed them inside with Sofia and 2 armed guards. The next 4 hours were an agony of waiting. Sofia did her best to keep Alessandro entertained, but the toddler knew something was wrong and cried on and off, asking for his papa with increasing desperation. Elena tried to stay calm, singing to Alessandro, playing quiet games, all while her mind spun with terrible possibilities. How many people had died? Was this the war Vincent had warned about? Was Dante safe, or was he walking into a trap? When the door finally opened, it revealed Dante, alive but covered in soot and blood that she hoped wasn't his. His eyes found Elena immediately, relief and fury warring across his features. "Are you hurt?" she asked, moving toward him with Alessandro in her arms. "Not my blood." His voice was flat, emotionless in a way that scared her more than anger would have. 12 people died in that explosion. Good people. Loyal people. Because Victor Castellano decided to send a message. Alessandro reached for his father, and Dante took him with hands that trembled slightly. He held his son close, breathing in the scent of him like it was the only thing keeping him anchored. "We need to talk," he said to Elena over Alessandro's head, "about what happens next." After Alessandro was down for his nap, Elena found Dante in his study with Vincent, Marco, and several other men she recognized as high-ranking members of his organization. Maps were spread across the desk, photographs of the explosion's aftermath, lists of casualties and damages. "This is war," one of the men was saying as Elena entered. "We can't let this stand. We hit back twice as hard, show them what happens when they attack us." "And start a bloodbath that draws federal attention and destroys everything we've built?" Vincent countered. "There are smarter ways to respond." "Smarter?" The man's voice rose. "They killed 12 of our people, Enough." Dante's single word cut through the argument like a knife. His eyes were cold, calculating, the crime boss fully present in a way Elena hadn't seen directed at his own people before. "We respond strategically, not emotionally. Vincent, what are our options?" They discussed possibilities for the next hour. Retaliation strikes, economic warfare, pulling strings with officials who owed them favors. Elena listened, horrified and fascinated by the casual discussion of illegal activities, of violence as business strategy, of lives as assets to be deployed. Finally, the others left, and Elena was alone with Dante. He looked exhausted, worn down by responsibilities that would break most people. "I need to ask you something," he said quietly, "and I need complete honesty. Always. Do you regret this? Getting involved with my family? With me? Stepping into a world where people die because of business decisions?" His eyes held hers. "Because if you want out, if this is too much, I'll arrange your protection and let you go. I won't keep you trapped in danger you didn't choose." Elena thought about the easy answer. Yes, this is too much. Get me out. But then she thought about Alessandro's laughter, about Lucia's fierce acceptance, about the way Dante had held her last night like she was precious beyond measure. "I chose this," she said firmly, knowing what it meant, knowing the risks. "Those 12 people who died, did they have families?" Dante nodded, clearly surprised by the question. "Most of them. Wives, children, parents who depended on them. Then we need to make sure those families are taken care of, that their deaths weren't meaningless." Elena moved closer. "And we need to find a way to end this that doesn't result in more people dying, not just for us, but for all the families caught in this war." "You think I can negotiate with Victor after he murdered my people? I think you're smart enough to find a way that protects your family without destroying others." She took his hands. "You told me once that you provide services the system fails to provide, that you protect communities. Prove it. Find a way to end this that lives up to those ideals." Dante stared at her for a long moment, and she saw the war playing out across his features, the desire for vengeance against the recognition that she might be right. "You're asking me to be better than this world allows," he said quietly. "I'm asking you to be the man Alessandro thinks you are, the man I believe you can be." Elena squeezed his hands. "Whatever you decide, I'm staying. I'm not running from this. From us. But I'm also not going to watch you become the thing you've been fighting against." That night, after hours of strategy sessions and difficult phone calls, Dante returned to their bedroom where Elena was reading. He looked older, tired, carrying weight that had nothing to do with physical burdens. "I've made a decision," he said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I'm calling a summit. All the families. Neutral territory. Diplomatic immunity. We're going to settle this permanently, either through negotiation or through establishing rules that prevent this kind of escalation in the future." "That's dangerous. Victor could use it as an opportunity to kill me in front of witnesses from every major family in New York. That would be suicide for him." Dante's expression was grim. "But yes, it's dangerous. Which is why I need you and Alessandro somewhere safe while this happens. My mother has offered to take you both to Naples until it's resolved." Elena's stomach dropped. "You're sending us away? I'm protecting you. If this goes wrong, if Victor decides war is preferable to peace, I need to know you and my son are beyond his reach." "And what about you? Who's protecting you?" "I have Marco, Vincent, an entire organization." He touched her face gently. "But I can't focus on finding a peaceful solution if I'm constantly worried about your safety. Please, Elena, let me do this knowing you're safe." The plea in his voice, the desperation beneath the calm facade, made her decision easy even though her heart protested. "Okay, we'll go to Naples. Wait there until this is resolved." She gripped his hand. "But you come back to us, Dante. You find your peaceful solution and you come back. Alessandro needs his father. And I—" Her voice broke slightly. "I need you." His kiss was fierce, almost desperate, carrying the weight of promises and fears neither of them wanted to speak aloud. 3 days later, Elena and Alessandro boarded a private plane to Naples, surrounded by enough security to invade a small country. Lucia met them at the airport, her fierce expression softening as Alessandro ran to her with delighted cries of "Nonna!" The villa in Naples was beautiful, ancient stone and modern comfort, overlooking the sea with views that took Elena's breath away. But she barely noticed, her mind constantly with Dante back in New York, preparing for a summit that could either end the war or escalate it beyond control. The days crawled by. Alessandro thrived in his grandmother's care, delighting in Italian relatives who spoiled him shamelessly. Elena tried to stay present for him, singing their lullabies, playing in Lucia's gardens, teaching him new words in both English and Italian. But at night, alone in a guest room that felt wrong without Dante's presence, she checked her phone obsessively for updates. Vincent sent brief messages. Summit scheduled. Preparations proceeding. Dante sends his love. The night of the summit, Elena couldn't sleep. She paced her room, imagining every terrible possibility, praying to gods she barely believed in for Dante's safety. At 3 a.m. Naples time, her phone finally rang, Dante's number, and she answered before the first ring finished. "Tell me you're okay," she demanded without greeting. His laugh was tired but genuine. "I'm okay. It's done. We have terms." Relief flooded through her so intensely she had to sit down. "What kind of terms?" Victor agreed to territorial boundaries, no targeting families, financial reparations for the warehouse bombing. Dante's voice carried exhaustion, but also something like hope. "It's not perfect peace, but it's stability. Rules we can work with." And he publicly acknowledged crossing lines that won't be tolerated by other families. "How did you convince him?" "I made it clear that continuation of the war would unite the other families against him, that he'd lose far more than he could gain. And I offered him face-saving compromises that let him claim some victories." He paused. "You were right. There was a way through this that didn't require more death." Elena's throat tightened with emotion. "I'm so proud of you." "Come home," Dante said softly. "Both of you. I miss my son, and I miss you. This house is empty without you. We'll take the first flight tomorrow. I'll be waiting." The return to New York felt like coming home in a way Elena's old apartment never had. When they landed, Dante was waiting on the tarmac. To hell with protocols. And Alessandro's delighted scream of "Papa" as he ran to his father made Elena's eyes sting with happy tears. Dante held his son close, then reached for Elena, pulling her into an embrace that felt like safety and homecoming and promise all at once. "I have something to ask you," he murmured against her hair. "And I want to do it properly, but I can't wait any longer." He set Alessandro down, then dropped to one knee right there on the tarmac while his security team tried not to smile, and Alessandro clapped with excitement. "Elena Moretti, you walked into my son's nursery and sang a lullaby that changed everything. You brought light back to this family when we were drowning in darkness. You stood beside me through danger and politics and impossible choices, and you made me want to be better than I thought possible." He pulled out a ring, simple, elegant, with a single diamond that caught the morning sun. "Will you marry me? Will you officially become part of this crazy, dangerous, loving family?" Through tears, Elena managed to say, "Yes. God, yes." Alessandro cheered, and Dante stood to kiss her while their security detail applauded, and somewhere in the background, Elena could hear Lucia's delighted voice on speakerphone, as Marco apparently had been streaming the proposal to her. 6 months later, they married in a small ceremony at the estate. Just family and closest friends, with Alessandro serving as ring-bearer and taking his job with utmost seriousness. Elena wore Giulia's necklace with Lucia's blessing, honoring the woman who'd come before while stepping into her own place in the family. The years that followed brought challenges, negotiations with rival families, federal investigations they had to navigate carefully, the constant balance of legitimate business and the shadows Dante still operated within. But they also brought joy. Alessandro thriving, growing into a bright, loving child who spoke Italian and English fluently and sang the old lullabies with perfect pitch. A daughter, born 3 years after the wedding, named Julia in honor of the mother she'd never meet, but whose memory lived on through stories and songs. Elena finished her degree eventually, online and part-time, and opened a music school for children in their neighborhood, fully funded by Dante's legitimate businesses and offering scholarships to families who couldn't afford lessons. It became her legacy, her way of bringing good from the complicated world she'd married into. And through it all, she and Dante built something that survived impossible odds, a love forged in crisis, tested by danger, and proven through choice. They chose each other every day, despite the complications and risks, because some connections transcend circumstances. On Alessandro's 5th birthday, as Elena watched her son and daughter play while Dante grilled in the garden and Lucia commanded everyone from her lawn chair like a benevolent dictator, she thought about how far they'd all come from that first day in the nursery. She'd walked into a crying child's room to offer comfort, and somehow found a family. Not the safe, simple life she'd planned, but something richer, more complex, built from broken pieces and beautiful moments in equal measure. Dante came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, chin resting on her shoulder as they watched their children play. "Happy?" he murmured. Elena leaned back into his embrace, home in every sense of the word. Incredibly. And she was. Despite everything, against all odds, impossibly and completely happy. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.